Echoes of the Void. This is a work of fiction and does not draw from real events. The following narrative is an entirely invented tale, a psychological thriller that weaves together the lives and perspectives of a handful of ordinary people turned extraordinary by unimaginable circumstances. The icy wind of a late October evening in Boston carried secrets through the narrow alleyways, whispering along the worn brick facades of abandoned warehouses. Michael Carter had long believed that the ghostly murmurings of the city were nothing more than urban legends, but tonight the sounds seemed eerily personal, as if the city itself were speaking his name. Michael, an investigative journalist with piercing blue eyes and a troubled past, hurried along the deserted streets clutching a small tape recorder. The rhythmic splatter of rain against the pavement merged with his pounding heartbeat as he recalled the cryptic message received earlier that week, a voice on the phone, barely audible, urging him to uncover what lies beneath. Michael's inner monologue was relentless. Was this a trap set by a cunning mind, a call for help, or a portent of dangers lurking in the shadows? From a quiet townhouse on Beacon Hill, Julia Edwards watched the rain intensify as she sipped her lukewarm tea. A therapist by profession, Julia had built her career on understanding the fractious nature of the human mind. However, tonight her thoughts were haunted not by the problems of her patients but by an unsettling dream, a haunting vision of a faceless figure beckoning her through a labyrinth of corridors she once knew too well. In a hushed tone, Julia murmured to herself, "I've seen horrors in my practice, but nothing like this." Her eyes, a deep brown flecked with determination, scanned the lamplight before her as she resolved to confront these unsettling memories head-on. Across town, in the bustling, rain-soaked streets of London, a city strangely linked to these events by invisible threads, Sebastian Reed paced outside a dimly lit pub near Camden. A former detective with a penchant for unraveling twisted conspiracies, Sebastian had traced multiple strands of a mystery that spanned continents. His mind raced with memories of unsolved disappearances and inexplicable phenomena that had left him questioning the boundary between sanity and madness. Every time the night falls, the past comes screaming back, he whispered to himself, his Italian accent thickened by years of international travel and haunted by regrets. The narrative of that night was far from simple. As rain cascaded down and the city's neon lights blurred into streams of color, these three lives converged. Michael's investigation, Julia's nightmares and inner battles, and Sebastian's persistence in chasing the enigmatic clues had all led to a derelict mansion on the outskirts of Boston, the notorious Haverhill estate. The mansion, with its crumbling facade and oppressive silence, had a reputation for absorbing hope and exuding despair. It was here that each of them would soon confront not only the mysteries of the past, but the darkest corners of their own psyches. Michael's recorder caught fragments of murmurs as he stepped over the threshold of the decaying building. "Hello," he called out into the darkness, only to be answered by an echo that seemed to reply from another dimension. In a moment of unexpected clarity, he remembered a conversation from a previous assignment. Sometimes, the dead never truly rest, they merely wait to be heard. His pulse quickened as he made his way further into the mansion's bowels, the beam of his flashlight dancing across peeling wallpaper and broken portraits that stared back as if warning him. Meanwhile, Julia had sensed that inexplicable pull drawing her to the very same estate. As she navigated the labyrinthine streets by taxi, her mind conjured images from her recurring dreams, a maze of corridors, endless staircases, and shadows that whispered unspeakable truths. The rhythmic hum of the taxi merged with the soft, persistent patter of rain, while memories of her late mentor, Dr. Leonard Barnes, surfaced unbidden. He had warned her once, the human mind is like a house built on sand, one tremor and it all crumbles. Now, as her taxi neared the mansion, Julia's thoughts churned with both trepidation and a fierce determination to face the specters of her past. Sebastian, having followed a trail of cryptic clues and whispered rumors across continents, arrived at the estate by a dark, winding road. He recalled an old case, a memory as persistent as the scars on his soul, a series of bizarre events dating back decades, inexplicable vanishings, and whispered accounts of psychological torment. There must be a reason, a common thread tying these tragedies together, he insisted softly, surveying the weather-beaten sign that bore the estate's name. The palpable silence around him was a stark contrast to the ferocious crescendo of thoughts swirling in his mind. Within the mansion's depths, Michael discovered a narrow passage behind a shattered bookshelf. The walls were lined with faded newspaper clippings and handwritten notes, each one hinting at horrors that defied explanation. In one faded article, the headline read, "Local family vanishes without a trace." Michael's hands trembled as he turned pages that chronicled a descent into madness, experiments in psychology that had left indelible scars on the community. As Michael's investigation deepened, his perspective merged with the unsettling voices that echoed in the corridors. "Remember us," they seemed to plead, a chorus of spectral voices that implored him to look deeper into the dark underbelly of the estate's history. Michael's internal monologue became a frantic dialogue with these disembodied murmurs. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" he demanded into the oppressive gloom. In answer, a single, raspy whisper resonated, "We want you to see, to remember." In another wing of the mansion, Julia carefully stepped into a grand, decaying parlor. Her eyes locked onto a large, ornate mirror hanging precariously above a marble fireplace. As she approached, she heard her own heartbeat thunder in her ears, a rhythmic symphony that masked the hushed confessions of the room. "Who am I?" the mirror seemed to challenge as it reflected a multitude of images, varied versions of herself, the professional, the victim, the survivor. Julia's voice, thick with emotion, broke the silence. "I am more than my nightmares," she declared, her declaration a vow to reclaim the parts of her identity stolen by grief and fear. The mansion was a convergence of despair and possibility, a place where the past and present intertwined like tangled vines. As Sebastian explored the crumbling library, a sudden movement led him to a hidden compartment behind a row of ancient volumes. Inside, he discovered a collection of diaries, their pages yellowed with age yet potent with revelations. The diaries belonged to a man named Edward Blackwell, a once prominent psychologist who had experimented with the deepest recesses of the human mind. Edward's entries were filled with descriptions of patients who had been driven to madness by the secrets of their own subconscious, experiments that blurred the line between therapy and torment. "We are the authors of our own horror," Edward wrote in one entry, the ink seeming to bleed into the paper. As Sebastian read the next passage, he could almost feel the oppressive weight of guilt and sorrow. "The mind is a labyrinth, and every twist conceals a trap that can shatter even the strongest soul. I fear what I have unleashed." Back in the oppressive gloom of the mansion's corridor, Michael's path finally converged with that of Julia's. The two encountered each other in a long-forgotten foyer where dust motes danced in the narrow beams of light seeping through broken windows. "Who are you?" Michael asked, his tone a blend of suspicion and weary curiosity. Julia's eyes, soulful and resolute, met his as she replied, "I'm someone who's come to reclaim my lost pieces." "And you?" The dialogue was measured, laden with the unspoken understanding that each had faced inner demons far more terrifying than any ghost of the past. Their conversation soon gave way to a cautious alliance. Determined to unravel the web of secrets that the mansion held, Michael recounted his discovery of the newspaper clippings and the disembodied voices, while Julia shared the haunting visions that had plagued her dreams. "It's like every stone in this place holds a memory, a cry for help," Michael remarked quietly. Julia nodded, replying, "And I fear that if we listen too closely, we might lose ourselves to the whispers of a maddening past." As the evening wore on and the storm outside intensified, the mansion seemed to come alive with spectral energy. In a dim corridor lined with portraits, Michael's footsteps suddenly halted in front of an image of a somber man with penetrating eyes. "Edward Blackwell," Michael whispered, recalling the name from Sebastian's findings. At that moment, a voice, almost imperceptible yet undeniably clear, spoke from behind him. "You've found what I could not bury," the voice intoned, laden with both regret and determination. Michael spun around, heart pounding, to see Julia standing silently with her hand over her heart, mirroring his quiet shock. The encounter left them both reeling, a confirmation that the estate was not merely a relic of a forgotten past but a living repository of tormented memories. "We need to understand," Michael insisted, his voice steadier than he felt. Every sound, every whisper, has a story behind it. The narrative now split into multiple streams as each character delved deeper into the layered mysteries of the night. Sebastian, piecing together Edward Blackwell's diaries, found that the psychologist had experimented with unlocking repressed memories stored deep in the human psyche, a process that, rather than healing, had unleashed uncontrollable horrors. In one particularly unsettling diary entry, Edward had written, "The mind, untamed by fear, can become a crucible of despair. I have seen visions of what we were never meant to confront, a mirror reflecting the monstrous essence of our souls." Sebastian's inner dialogue was at once analytical and tormented as he mulled over the implications. Could it be that Blackwell's experiments inadvertently triggered a chain reaction? Have these corridors absorbed his sorrow and madness, and now are they a vortex drawing in any soul that dares cross its threshold? His thoughts were interspersed with flashes of his own personal loss, a reminder that even the most disciplined mind could be overwhelmed by the phantom strains of memory. Elsewhere in the mansion, Julia found herself alone in a long, mirror-lined hallway. Each reflection of her form became a question, a silent interrogation of her inner self. In one particularly long moment, as the sound of her footsteps faded into the background, she heard a quiet, desperate plea emanating from one of the mirrors, "Remember me." The voice was both faint and insistent, a cry from a part of herself that longed to be freed from the chains of repressed memory. "I will remember," she whispered, her voice echoing with newfound resolve. As midnight approached, the storm outside reached a fevered pitch. The mansion itself seemed to pulse with a living, malignant energy that pervaded every nook and cranny. Michael and Julia, now united by a shared sense of urgency, decided to venture into the mansion's once secret underground passageways, a network of tunnels that Edward Blackwell had used for his clandestine experiments. Their footsteps, synchronized in a mix of apprehension and determination, resonated through the cold stone tunnels. Michael's narrative interwove with Julia's as they discovered a hidden laboratory preserved in eerie stillness. The room was littered with archaic scientific instruments, faded photographs of long-gone subjects, and cryptic notes scrawled in an unintelligible hand. "This is horrifying," Michael murmured, his voice trembling. "It's as if the very essence of human fear has been distilled into these instruments." Julia's eyes filled with tears, not merely of sorrow, but of vindication. "I've been haunted by these images for years," she confessed softly. "I always believed there was a connection between my dreams and this place." Their dialogue was interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing above them. Sebastian's determined voice crackled over a handheld radio he had managed to salvage during his exploration. "I've found something," he announced urgently. "Check the stairwell behind the library. There's evidence that ties everything together." The ensuing moments were a frantic race against an invisible clock. Sebastian, Michael, and Julia converged at the site, where a hidden door led to a vaulted chamber filled with relics of a tormented past. Among these relics was a meticulously preserved journal, a final testament left by Edward Blackwell. Its pages were filled with scrawled diagrams, remorseful confessions, and ominous warnings. As they read, the words seemed to coalesce into a disturbing prophecy. When the forgotten awaken, the mind must face its hidden abyss. Only by acknowledging the terror within can we hope to escape the cycle of despair. The psychological terror that had haunted each of them now took on an almost tangible form. Michael's rational mind struggled against the encroaching madness as he conversed with the group, his tone alternating between scientific inquiry and raw emotion. "This is real. There is a method to this madness, a connection between memory, loss, and the very structure of fear." Julia, ever the sensitive observer of human emotion, added, "It's as if our deepest insecurities have been manifested by this place. We must confront them or be consumed by them." For hours that bled into one another, the trio pieced together the disjointed narrative of Edward Blackwell's experiments. Their conversations took on the character of hushed confessions, laden with genuine vulnerability. In one charged exchange, Michael said, "I'm not sure if I'm prepared to face the parts of myself I've long ignored. What if these memories are too monstrous to bear?" Julia reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. Some truths are painful, Michael, but they are also our liberation. If we bury them further, they will fester until they become something unrecognizable. Outside, the storm subsided to a gentle, rhythmic drizzle as if the night itself had taken a deep, cathartic breath. The trio emerged from the underground depths into the pale light of dawn, a moment of fragile clarity after a night steeped in psychological torment. Each of them carried the weight of their newly unearthed secrets, Michael with the burden of relentless inquiry, Julia with the painful clarity of her inner shadows, and Sebastian with the quiet resignation of a man who had seen too much. As the day began to break, each character experienced a moment of introspection from their unique perspective. Michael's internal narrative shifted from one of trepidation to cautious optimism. Maybe, he thought, by facing our inner demons we can begin to mend what has been broken. Julia's eyes, still glistening with the remnants of tearful revelations, reflected a newfound determination. I have always been afraid of what lies within. Now, I must accept that the darkness and light coexist. I am both frightened and empowered by what I have seen. Sebastian, stepping away from the confines of the mansion with a lingering heaviness, murmured to himself, the past is an inescapable labyrinth. But perhaps, in recognizing its contours, I can finally steer my future. In the weeks that followed, the events of that night reverberated into the broader tapestry of their lives. Michael published an in-depth account of the Haverhill estate, inviting both acclaim and controversy. Every article he wrote was laced with the lingering echoes of the mansion's despair, as though the building's secrets had intertwined with his very soul. Readers found themselves drawn to the raw intensity of his narrative, a blend of journalistic rigor and personal vulnerability reminiscent of the darkest psychological thrillers. Julia, meanwhile, integrated her experiences into her therapeutic work. In quiet sessions with longtime patients, she recounted, often with trembling intensity, the lessons learned from facing her nightmares. There is a power in acknowledging your pain, she would say softly. It is only when you stare into that abyss and recognize the fear within yourself that you can truly begin to heal. Her reputation grew, and her empathetic approach in helping others find strength in vulnerability earned her respect far beyond the confines of her modest practice. Sebastian, though more reticent in sharing his ordeal, found solace in returning to the remnants of Edward Blackwell's research. He began to document his own journey, a quiet manifesto on human fallibility and resilience. Late at night in his study overlooking the Thames, he would write in a leather-bound journal, his pen bleeding emotions that spoke of loss, regret, and the enduring hope that one day even the darkest chapters of the mind could be reinterpreted as the genesis of strength. In the wake of these transformative events, connections began to surface among those who had been touched directly or indirectly by the mysteries of the Haverhill estate. Former skeptics of the paranormal recast their disbelief when inexplicable phenomena emerged in isolated areas of Boston and London alike. Whispers of events that defied logic spread across social networks like wildfire, interlacing with urban legends and fueling an insatiable curiosity. Yet among the cacophony of voices, a consistent theme emerged, the acknowledgement of an underlying truth about the human experience, that our most profound fears reside in the recesses of our own minds. One overcast afternoon in Boston, Michael found himself revisiting the now abandoned mansion. The building, ravaged by time and yet strangely unyielding, stood as a monument to both neglect and perseverance. Determined to record every detail, he wandered through the echoing corridors with his recorder in hand. There's a story behind every creak, he mused aloud, stopping before a large, shattered window that framed the overgrown mansion gardens. The wind carried not just the scent of rain and decay, but a subtle pulse, a heartbeat that otherwise might have been dismissed as the whisper of history. As Michael documented these moments, the narrative seamlessly shifted between the internal dialogues of our characters. Julia, who had grown more introspective since her fateful night at the estate, now saw the world in layers of vulnerability and resilience. Every person you meet is a repository of untold stories and hidden scars, she wrote in her journal, her careful script a testament to her evolving understanding. When you listen, really listen, you begin to unravel the interconnected tapestry of our shared pain but also our capacity for redemption. Meanwhile, Sebastian's journey continued in London, where he found himself drawn into collaborations with academic researchers and paranormal experts alike. Together, they delved into archival records, unearthing forgotten documents that charted the psychological experiments of a bygone era. Late nights in cramped libraries and long walks along fog-enshrouded streets led him to question not only the nature of fear but also its transformative potential. In every mind lies a factory of both nightmares and dreams, he mused during one reflective phone call with Michael. And perhaps our task is to decipher which is which before the two become indistinguishable. As months faded into a new season, the lives of Michael, Julia, and Sebastian became irrevocably intertwined by their shared journey, a journey that transcended the boundaries of ordinary existence and confirmed the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. Their disparate voices melded into a rich, continuous narrative in which the lines between objective reality and personal perception blurred into a single, haunting truth, that the echoes of the past never truly disappear, but instead, become part of the living present. On a crisp winter morning in central London, while a pale sun struggled to warm the frost-bitten streets, Sebastian found himself returning to the precinct of his former detective days. In a conversation with an old colleague, he recounted the labyrinthine investigation at the Haverhill estate with a candor that surprised even him. "I was chasing shadows," he admitted, leaning back in a threadbare armchair at a quiet cafe. "But sometimes, the most persistent shadows are the ones we cast on ourselves, the regret, the unspoken sorrow, the fear of our own potential for darkness." His friend, Andrew, a pragmatic man with a knack for cutting through pretension, simply nodded. "We all have our demons, Sebastian," Andrew replied. "The only difference is how we choose to live with them." Even as the experiences of that profound night receded into memory, Michael never allowed himself the luxury of forgetting. Each time he sat down to write, he felt the weight of every untold story etched into the mansion's rotting walls. The recorded whispers still played back in his mind like a broken record, urging him to explore further the fragile interplay between memory and identity. "If we do not confront our past, it will continue to haunt us," he wrote in one of the many articles that followed. "But if we dare to face it, we may just find the key to unlocking a more compassionate future." Julia continued to build a sanctuary for those in pain. Her practice, enriched by the raw authenticity of her own transformative journey, soon became a haven for individuals grappling with the darker corridors of their minds. In intimate group sessions held in a modest community center in Boston, she would invite her clients to explore their inner labyrinths. "Remember," she would say softly, "it is only when you understand the darkness that you can truly appreciate the light." In the final pages of their intertwined lives, the trio found solace not in the eradication of fear, but in its careful acknowledgement. They had come to understand that every haunting memory, every ghostly whisper, served as a catalyst for growth, a reminder that the human mind, in all its complexity, was also a reservoir of untapped strength. In one final, heart-stopping moment of reconvergence, Michael, Julia, and Sebastian gathered once more at the edge of the Haverhill estate. The morning fog cloaked the mansion in an ephemeral mist as if nature itself was offering a benediction. Michael looked at his companions and said, "We have seen the void, and in that darkness, we have discovered a spark. The question now is how we spread that light." Julia, her eyes shining with both resolute determination and quiet melancholy, replied, "The past may never be rewritten, but we have the power to shape our future one truth at a time." Sebastian, ever the observer of life's dualities, simply added, "In the echoes of our despair lie the traces of hope. In every shadow cast by our minds, there is also space for redemption." And so, as the fog slowly lifted and the day blossomed into a cautious promise, the three souls, each bearing their own marks of trauma and resilience, stepped forward into the light. They carried with them not only the scars of the past, but also the hope of a future built upon the acknowledgement of its lessons. Their narratives, once fragmented by fear and uncertainty, had finally coalesced into something resolute and enduring. Amid the quiet hum of a city awakening, the legacy of the Haverhill estate remained imprinted on their hearts, a reminder that even in the depths of psychological terror, the human spirit can triumph over its own inner void. Michael's articles, Julia's therapy sessions, and Sebastian's reflective writings became beacons for others who had, like them, once trembled before the darkness. They had learned that sometimes the greatest adventure lies not in forging a path free of scars, but in embracing every forgotten whisper of the past and transforming it into a step toward healing. In the final analysis of that fateful encounter, each individual discovered that no matter how deep the void, there was always a way back, a subtle interplay of memory, emotion, and the unwavering capacity for change. And as the echoes of that long, stormy night slowly faded into history, one undeniable truth emerged, that within the darkness, amidst countless regrets and heartbreak, there always existed the possibility of rebirth. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to my channel, like the video, and check the description for details on how to support my work.